this is the day after I did the long rein video at the walk. Oops, you can see Ozzy still favors dorsal tip left rotation. So I haven't ridden him in a week. I did 5 days of intensive long rein work where we worked for an hour and a half at the walk, really trying to crack through some of these pattern of movement changes that we're after. So I just got on him. I did not do any groundwork. This may not be pretty, but I want to see if even in the early part of the ride, and I'm just going to start with an easy figure 8, and I want to see if the work we did on the long reins helps with the riding. And already, as soon as I got on him today, his back is not quite as tight as it normally is. It's a little bit softer, and it's definitely more level. He still has more trouble. He wants to roll his back to the left with inverted rotation when we track right. And when we track left, he wants to fall in a little bit on that left front shoulder. All right? So I'm just going to do a figure 8 or 2 and feel my way into increasing the use of the hind legs, the engagement of the hind legs, as much as I can. So I'm going to try to tighten the turn, and he doesn't have to be fast, but I shouldn't be giving him a lot of leg to maintain forward. Little reminder here and there is fine, but he should basically have enough energy to just be self-propelled at the walk, but I'm going to let him pick his speed. As long as he's self-propelled and I'm not having to drive for every step or use my leg aids constantly, then I can relax my muscles and feel where I need to use my body to resist the problem and encourage a change in use. I'm still having to use the reins to make the turn a little bit, but not having to bend the neck so much, which is a big improvement. So the more I can get him to go around these tight turns with the neck straight instead of bent, the more we're going to work those oblique muscle groups, the adductors and adductors, which will help with his overall balance, his ability to stabilize, and his ability to lift. So there I had to bend the neck quite a bit to make the turn. So I'll give him a few more minutes on a pretty easy, imperfect figure 8, but sort of turning as tight as I can without losing forward. And like I said before, the last time I rode him, I've completely given up on resisting that rooting and pulling at all, because it's sort of directly related to the toe dragging and the struggle he's having with flexing the hind leg joints. So there I had to give a little bit of leg. And he's pretty focused. He's really trying. He's very mentally focused on what we're doing and very calm. So this is good. Without any groundwork today. I did groundwork all last week, and my plan, my hopeful plan, is this week, if he can work for an hour under saddle without losing forward completely, then I will repeat basically what I did on the long reins last week under saddle this week. So I'll give him another minute or 2 on a figure 8. And then I think I'll work on the right direction first, to the right, because that's the hind leg that is a little more troublesome for him, has a little bit worse function compared to the left. And going to the left, he has a tendency to really drop his weight on that left front. So I can correct the left front a little easier if I work to the right first and help stabilize that right hind. Okay, so this time as I come around to the right, What I'm doing is trying to turn as tight as I can with the neck relatively straight. That's my best case scenario. And I'm having to put quite a lot of body weight down my right side in order to stay level. So I'm going to give him 5 minutes here, maybe 10, depending on how he's doing. And you'll just see he's still physically struggling to make these changes, especially through his back and hindquarter, but not really fighting me. He's doing his best. So we'll see. My plan is to ride him for the whole hour, but I'm just showing you maybe the first 20-25 minutes of the ride. I don't want the video to get too long, but I want you to see him sort of warm up, because the very first part of the ride is always the hardest for him as well as me. Now there, I've lost forward. So I'm going to make my circle a little bit bigger, because he didn't just come off my leg aid, and there he just did it again. So that can be a sign that what I'm asking of him, unless he's pooping, nope, that what I'm asking is a little bit in the too hard category. So I'm going to take him off straighter, and I'm going to make the circle bigger, which doesn't require quite as much engagement. It doesn't require as deep of a placement of that hind leg. But I would like him to start making these circles with a straighter and straighter neck. And he is following my seat pretty well. I still need a little bit of a leading rein and sometimes a little bit of rein to keep the neck straight. But this size circle, almost double what I was just doing, he's starting to find self-propelled forward again. Because if I don't have the self-propelled forward, I can't really work with the coordination. If I'm the one doing all the work to get the forward, or if he's rushing and can't slow down, then it's very difficult to change the coordination. It needs to be self-propelled, but it can be slow. Because the slowness for him is where he's learning to control his own body weight and really has to flex those hind legs when he resists his own body weight falling forward. That's how we're restoring the flexion to the hip joint, the stifle, and the hock. So this is about the size circle where he slowly motors along, and I can work with the rotation, the rolling of the barrel. I can work with reducing the lateral bending around the circle so the neck remains straighter and straighter in line with my seat bones. And my circle isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but round enough to challenge the leg placement and big enough that he can happily maintain forward. And we still have the pulling and the rooting, because that's directly related to the use and the stability of the hindquarters. So I'm not resisting it, because it has not helped him use his hindquarter or back any better. He starts to drop his back and go crooked when I gave him rein resistance. So I just eliminated that and went, let's keep building the hindquarter. So there he stopped a little, but went forward off my leg. So I think I'm still on an appropriate size circle. And it's interesting, his balance feels a bit better. I'm not getting as much pressure on my inside seat bone, and I'm not having to use the reins to steer to the point that I really have to bend his neck to make the turn. And those are really good signs of improvement in his coordination, but he wants a bigger circle. And I can feel the hind legs are not super engaged, but engaged enough that he's not constantly falling forward. If he were constantly falling forward, I would have to tighten up the turn a little to help change the placement of the hind legs, even if I had to bend the neck at first to get that done. So those little halts like that, as long as he doesn't get stuck, when I give a leg aid and maybe a little tap with my finger, he should easily restore forward. If he doesn't, and he starts really resisting the leg aid and the tap, I have to make the circle bigger again and make it easier for him. Good, he's got a lot of changes. His front end is getting looser as his hind end is becoming more stable. And when I say hind end, I also mean under the saddle. So that's about 5 minutes into it. And I'm really hoping he can be ridden for a whole hour at a time now without getting too tired. But even though this looks slow and it doesn't look like much, he's having to use muscles in his back and hindquarter and around the flexion of the hind leg joints that he has not used in a long time. So when you're changing the balance, you're really having to work with either some atrophied muscles or very weak muscles that haven't been doing their job in a while. And I'm not letting him use his strongest muscles that keep him in his old habit. So that's why they can fatigue easily from what seems like very little work, right? But the longer he can go under saddle, the more muscle building I'm doing while I'm riding compared to working on the long reins, even at trot. The weight bearing really builds the muscles, and the same balance he had achieved on the long reins that we kind of gently hammered on last week. It's the same coordination, but with a rider on board, it requires more strength, more of everything to come into the same coordination while he's weight bearing that he found without weight bearing. And I can see the marks where I'm riding that he's dragging his feet, but I don't hear it this time, so I'm hoping it's less. But until he really gets comfortable flexing those hind leg joints and using his back in flexion instead of extension, that is going to be slow to change. Now, if this was painful for him, I would get a whole lot more resistance to forward. He would either refuse to go forward. I'd have to be really pushing for every step, no matter what I did. Or he would start to get distracted and anxious and start to show what we would call behavioral issues. The fact that the ears are kind of half out, like they are now. Oh, now we're pooping. And he has very calm energy. Just like in the groundwork, what that tells me is physically what I'm asking him to do using his body correctly is difficult for him. I'm sure there's some degree of discomfort, but I'm not getting a pain response. When it's painful for a horse, they're either going to shut down and become super heavy to the aids, or angry and resistant to the aids, or they're going to start getting anxious, going faster, showing more anxiety, getting more alert to their environment, that kind of thing. So those behaviors are how I read that I'm hitting a threshold of discomfort for this particular horse, and I need to back off. I need to make it easier, or I need to give him a break. The stopping and thinking, that's just him telling me it's hard. The slow speed and having to make a bigger circle, that's just him telling me it's difficult, it's hard. But if it were painful, he would start to escalate fear and defensiveness. He would also start to feel more and more unstable under the saddle rather than more and more stable. Right now, he's slowly getting more stable. So that's just about 10 minutes. And I'm barely cracking through. So what I'm going to try to do in the rides this week is at least 20, if not 30 minutes on one direction, then change direction and do another 20, if not 30 minutes on the other direction. It'll probably be a little bit bigger circle like I'm doing now, but I'm going to adjust my circle size depending on the amount of forward energy he can offer. And right now I'm at the minimum size circle for him to mostly keep moving voluntarily without me having to push a lot. Okay, so here I'm going to change direction. I'm just going to try to follow my same basic path. And again, mostly with the neck straight and the barrel level. I want him to come around this turn, widening the legs, moving the legs a little bit laterally, which you won't really be able to see if he does it correctly. Every once in a while you might see a lateral swing to one of the legs. But if he's really straight through his midline and level through his back, the lateral movement of the legs in a light adduction, abduction, you really don't see. They just kind of look square going around the circle. And I'm using, like here, I have to use a fair bit of rein and bend the neck a little to make the turn, and he stopped. So my bad, shouldn't have made such a tight turn. I might have to widen out this circle a little. Make it bigger and easier. And it's interesting, he roots more to the left. When I track left is when he pulls the reins more and pushes on the bit. And it also so happens this is the direction that he falls forward more. So that little misstep with the left front is what I call technically, not very technically, a shoulder clunk. And a shoulder clunk is just the muscles in the thoracic sling, especially around the scapula, changing tone, usually releasing excessive tension. I don't know why it sort of does it all at once like that, but it's very, very common as the back and hindquarter become more stable. He starts to control his own body weight better, resisting the fall forward more and more, which lightens the weight on the front legs. And so at the very same rate that the back and hindquarter are gaining stability, the shoulders and neck are losing tension, right? So you get these sort of sudden muscle changes. Please don't step in your poop. And it's very interesting. Going to the left used to be his much easier direction, and going to the right was where I got a lot of resistance. And just with our week of long rein work, that's definitely reversed. So even though he still wants to seat me over to the left, which means we haven't changed his habitual rotation issue, he's struggling more to find his balance and stability, tracking left, and going to the right is now feeling a little easier for him. So the direction of travel has reversed as far as which one feels easier and which one feels a little harder for him. And that's normal. If we're really making some deep internal changes, that happens pretty often. What was once the easy direction kind of becomes the hard direction, and what was once the hard direction becomes the easy direction. So I'm actually pretty pleased with how he's feeling the first 20 minutes of this ride after a week of groundwork and no riding, and then no groundwork as a warm-up today. I think he's made some of the changes I was hoping to achieve with the extra time walking on the long reins. He's already made the changes I was hoping to achieve in his trot work on the ground. So now what I need to do is strengthen those changes this week by trying to just really focus on the riding and keep it really simple. Whatever size circle he can manage without losing forward, hopefully with ease of steering from the saddle, but I still have to use the reins. And a lot of that pulling down and pushing on the bit to the right, you notice it's mostly gone. That means he feels more stable tracking right on the right hind, and he doesn't yet feel quite as stable tracking left and balancing on the left hind. So I might have to make this circle even bigger because I had to bend his neck to stay on the circle and turn. And now that's a resistance to forward. So that's him starting to tell me that it took him that long and a couple of taps to go back from halt into the walk. That tells me I need to make this circle on this direction even a bit easier for him. So I'm just going to widen it out and make it a lot bigger. I'll go above the poop instead of below the poop. Still trying not to step in it. And I still need the inside rein to make the turn, but I did not have to bend his neck as severely as I did when the circle was tighter. And again, if he can just maintain forward without me having to do it for him, then I can keep working on the balance. If he's not self-propelled, then it's very hard to change the balance and achieve self-control. So here, I'm going to make the turn even wider. There's all that fussiness with the neck, which goes hand in hand with him feeling stable or unstable on his own hindquarter. Yeah, a little bit bigger circle. Again, so I have to do a slightly larger circle to the left for him to choose to stay forward than I do to the right. And both circles are quite a bit bigger than what we were doing on the long reins. Otherwise, he's really losing forward. Oh, that's a little bit of a tighter turn I hadn't planned on. Good. And he's no longer just pushing up on my right seat bone. He's alternating quite a bit more. And just there, I'm having to shift quite a lot of weight to my left side to not be thrown out to the right. And especially if I have to bend the neck a little to steer and make the turn, it's going to exaggerate that problem. There we go. And I can feel the shoulders getting a bit looser, the back getting more relaxed, less tense, less upward force on both seat bones. But very difficult for him to stay engaged and really use his hindquarters and back to resist his body weight falling forward. But better than how he had been doing. So I'm pretty pleased with it, and I'm hoping a week at the walk doing exactly like this, then I'll do another video and catch you up. 2 more minutes. Yeah, I may have to use the whole riding area to keep the forward today, which is fine. Because if he can maintain the forward and just make changes on a bigger circle, we can work our way down back to the smaller circles and increase the engagement again. Yeah, so this time I'm going to kind of go all the way around. And that's about 10 minutes each way, just to show you where we're at. But I can already feel, for him to maintain forward for hopefully an hour's ride, I'm going to have to use quite a big area. I can't do too tight of a circle, especially with the neck straight. And he goes, oh, are we done? No, we're not done. And if I can get him where I would like him this week at the walk, then I feel a whole lot better about starting to bump him up to trot under saddle. So he's still pretty wobbly. He's still pretty unsure. Interestingly, more to the left direction now than the right direction, which means we're making some big progress with the right hind. Now it's a matter of changing the pattern around the left front. So we're going to work on that today, tediously. And in about a week of this, if I change what I'm doing, I will for sure do another update video. My plan is just to do this for an hour every day for a week, and then I will send you another update video on how we have progressed. So that's it for now.